This is the International Soccer Preview, and we are Soccerphiles Canada. Welcome to Series 17. We're looking at the squads of the 2023 Gold Cup. This episode is the short version for Canada's players. Here we go. All right, well, welcome back to part 2 of the podcast or the media cast. We are now in June, so the preliminary and final roster has been produced. And I'm just going to summarize what we did in part 1 because we're making a short version of this with just part 2. So in part 1, we made a list of the candidates available to Canada, and we categorized them in terms of likelihood of reaching the squad. So we're going to reproduce that list here, or not reproduce it. We're going to show that list here and then go through the players who made the preliminary and final roster. So it turns out to be a partial B team for Canada. I'm a bit upset about that because I thought with the USA and possibly Mexico sending a B team, that Canada would have a good chance to win it. But there are several reasons that manager John Herdman gave for leaving some of the best players off. Some of the best ones remain, though, and we'll see as we go through. One of the reasons was that some players, even though they were playing in the Nations League finals there a couple of days ago, were carrying injuries in that tournament. So particularly Alphonse Davies, but we'll specify what we know for each player as we go through. Another reason given was that some players are negotiating new contracts, so are off the team in order to do that. And generally, some players need rest. The World Cup was in December this year, thanks for that, FIFA, and need rest, having played a big tournament already, as well as the season. Also, the Gold Cup is every 2 years, so we've seen over the past few years some of the bigger teams sending B team squads to the Gold Cup, so not really a shock. Anyway, Canada produced a 56-man preliminary squad and later cut that to 23 players. So we'll go through the players and see who made it. So of course the manager hasn't changed, so John Herdman, we'll view him as reaching the squad. And if you're looking at the graphics, I'm going to highlight the ones who made the final squad in green and the ones who made the preliminary squad in blue, and the ones who didn't make the preliminary squad will just leave the way they were. So let's move on to goalkeepers. And we had Milan Borjan as a definite goalkeeper. So he did make the squad. So one of the kind of starters that was brought to the cup. Likely candidate Dane St. Clair also made the squad. And the possible candidate, Tom McGill, also made the squad. So we had possible but unlikely James Pantimus and Thomas Hassel. Thomas Hassel actually did make the preliminary squad there. James Pantimus did not. And Jason Lutweiler, who seemed to be off the squad, is indeed off the squad. He was not on the preliminary squad. And then we had flagged Maxime Crepeau as an injured candidate. And actually, he did make the preliminary squad there, but he was injured with a fractured tibia there and is obviously not fit to join the squad for the cup. So Milan Borjan, Dane St. Clair, and Tom McGill, the goalkeepers for the 2023 Gold Cup. Moving on to central defenders, we had Scott Kennedy as a definite candidate. Again, we won't review our thinking behind that, but that's all in part 1. And he did make the squad. We had 2 likely candidates, Derek Cornelius and Stephen Vittoria. So Stephen Vittoria, a starter for the team, did make the squad. Derek Cornelius, just a preliminary squad there, not making the final squad. Moving on to possible candidates. Well, Kamal Miller is a starter, but we had him at the possible level, and but he did make the squad. No surprise, to be honest. Joe Waterman, we had as a these are all likely candidates. Joe Waterman and Kyle Hebert both made the preliminary squad. They were our possible candidates. And we had two possible but unlikely candidates in Daniil Henry and in Lucas McNaughton. And both of them made the preliminary squad, but not the final squad. Also, we have two players who are new added to the squad here. So the first of them is Moise Bombito. So because he's new, I will give a little information on him. He was named to the preliminary squad despite, no, he actually did appear on the bench for both of the Nations League final games. Didn't start any, but on the bench for both. And he doesn't have any caps then for Canada and is 22 years old and plays for Colorado Rapids in the USA, kind of halfway between their first and second team there, Moise Bombito. And we also have Zach McGraw, who is 26 years old, and he also doesn't have any caps for the squad and was named to the preliminary squad despite never having even appeared on the bench. He is with the Portland Timbers in the United States since 2020. So Moise Bombito and Zach McGraw both named to the final squad. All right, at left back, we had no definite candidates and then one likely candidate in Sam Adekugbe. And Sam Adekugbe has reached the squad. So again, he's not quite a starter for Canada, kind of a sometime starter, but I'm definitely happy to have him here. No bias, by the way, I'm being completely objective. That's not true. Okay, well, we had one player who seemed to be off the squad in Christian Gutierrez, and he is off the squad, not named to the preliminary squad. And we had one possible but unlikely candidate in Raheem Edwards, and he was named to the preliminary squad, but not the final squad. Over at right back, we have a big loss for Canada in Alistair Johnson. Alistair Johnson was named as one of the players kind of carrying an injury in the Nations League final games there. He also played in the World Cup, so he was just named to the preliminary squad, but sadly not to the final squad. We had a possible candidate with Dominic Zator. Dominic Zator did make the final squad, as did our possible but unlikely candidate, Zachary Brolt-Guillard, making the final squad. He kind of was the backup for Alistair Johnson, at least some of the time. He was in the 2019 Gold Cup, so I think Alistair Johnson missing makes a bit more room for him. For Dominic Zator, although Dominic Zator seems a little ahead of him at this point. Okay, in the midfield, we move on to the midfield and with defensive midfielders. And I'm delighted to say that Stephen Eustachio will be on the squad for the 2023 Gold Cup. And we had two possible candidates with Fraser Liam and Atiba Hutchinson. Both of these players just named to the preliminary squad. I'm a bit surprised about Liam Fraser. Did I say Fraser Liam? Liam Fraser. A bit surprised that he didn't make it, but Atiba Hutchinson had actually announced that the Nations League final game would be his final game. So he was named to the preliminary squad. Probably way ahead of time, just in case. If you're not named to the preliminary squad, you can't be part of the final squad. So just to keep that door open, he was probably named, but he has announced that that was his final game. Meanwhile, we have Samuel Piette, the kind of consistent sub in this position. However, he is injured. We did report that in the first part, out with a groin injury, and that seems to have extended to now, so not selected. He's been part of every Gold Cup since 2013, so I'm a bit sad to be missing him, but Samuel Piette on the injured list. Moving on to central midfielders, Ismail Kone was our definite candidate there, but he only made the preliminary squad, and I didn't hear specifically what reason was given for him not being on the squad. I'm a bit surprised because I think he started the Nations League final games, but he wasn't a starter in the World Cup. I kind of expected him to be here, but no, he is not. Mark Anthony K2, not called up for those Nations League final games, but I kind of expected him to make the squad, especially if some of the starters are missing, but he's not. He's just on the preliminary squad, Mark Anthony K. The one who did make it was our possible candidate, Victor Loturi. So Victor Loturi making it to the final squad there. Very new to Canada. He doesn't have any caps for them. Okay, well, the biggest player on Canada is Alphonso Davies, and many Canadians will know the news that he is not on the squad. He was carrying an injury actually for the last couple of months with Bayern Munich there, so he was just used as a substitute in the first Nations League game there against Panama. It didn't stop him from scoring a goal, but I think it was widely expected that he wouldn't be selected for the squad. However, Junior Hoylett is on the squad, so the veteran will be in the midfield there. We're not really going to get into starters here, but you know, the number of players missing might mean that Junior Hoylett will be a starter. We do have a new player here, and it's Ahmed Ali appointed to the team. Ahmed Ali had never appeared even as a substitute before being named to the preliminary squad. So he has no caps for Canada, and he is with the Vancouver Whitecaps since 2023. Just 22 years old is Ahmed Ali. However, he was listed as injured with a concussion, and I'm not sure how recent that is. A concussion is probably not a very long-term thing. I don't know if it'll affect his participation in this cup, but nevertheless, he is on the roster, Ahmed Ali. Moving over to the right midfield, we have David Wotherspoon. We had him as a possible candidate. In fact, the only player coded as a right midfielder for Canada, and he does make the squad. And on the left wing, also the highest level candidate we had was at the possible level, and Jaden Nelson is who that was, and he did not make the squad. Just on the preliminary squad, David Nelson. Instead, our possible but unlikely candidate, David Schaffelberg, did make the squad. On the right wing is Tajon Buchanan, and sadly, he is not part of the squad, named to the preliminary squad, but not for the final squad. And I'm not sure, I didn't hear specifically what the reason was for him. It could have been any of the ones that we gave above. But my brother did tell me that he was also in contract negotiations, so that might be the reason for him, but I didn't get confirmation on that. However, we have Richie Laria, and I'm happy to say that he will be on the squad. Always working hard for Canada is Richie Laria. Larea, I've heard it pronounced, and yes, anyway, Richie Larea. Moving on to the forward section, then we have Jonathan Osorio. the staple for Canada, who will be on the squad. Even though he was part of the World Cup, he was just a substitute there. And actually, if you go back to part one, you'll kind of see a certain logic to here. A lot of the starters are missing, but if they were a substitute or not involved in the World Cup, it seemed to improve their chances. That's why I'm a bit surprised Ismail Kone wasn't selected. Where is my Kyle Larin? Okay. I don't know why I have Kyle Larin as a attacking midfielder here. I'm going to move him to the forward line. We had Kyle Larin as a definite as a forward, along with Jonathan David. So I'll start with Jonathan David. He is a player engaged in contract negotiations, so is not selected for this squad, sadly. And also Kyle Larin, just on the preliminary squad, both of them. So we'll be looking at some new names on the forward line. One of those new names will not be Io Akinola. He was only named to the preliminary squad. But Lucas Cavallini is now probably the starting forward named to the squad. And then most of the other names are kind of players we don't see that much. So we have Liam Miller. All of these were possible, from Lucas Cavallini, Io Akinola, and Liam Miller here, a possible candidate making the squad. And also Charles Andreas Brim, a player whose name I've heard a lot but actually haven't seen that much. I'll probably see him in this cup because he's on the squad. And our final possible candidate was Ike Ugbo, and he just made the preliminary squad but not the final squad. We had Theo Corbeau as a possible but unlikely candidate, and he turned out to be named to the preliminary squad but not the final squad. And finally, we have a new candidate here, somebody just added to the squad in Russell Rowe. It's Jason Russell Rowe. And he also had never been on the bench even for Canada before being named to the preliminary squad. But he's 21 years old and plays for Columbus Crew in the USA, I think sometimes between the first and second team. And he was with Toronto FC before that, but never got above the second team for them. But he is very young, so has time. Okay, and we'll finish up here just by summarizing some of the information. So the biggest news being that Canada has brought a partial B team here, some of their biggest names off the squad, but some of their big names making the squad. And we'll just go over some of the notable non-selections first. So first we have central defender Derek Cornelius. We had considered him a likely candidate. Not a huge surprise there, but he was only named to the preliminary squad and not the final squad. Right back, Alistair Johnson, just named to the preliminary squad. A surprise there, but we heard he was carrying an injury. For defensive midfielders, again, not a huge surprise. With Liam Fraser, I did think he would make it. He was at the possible level for us, but didn't make the squad. I thought, especially with the openings of some players not being there, he would make it. And Atiba Hutchinson, but those in the know knew that the Nations League final would be the last game for him. He had said so. In the central midfield, I'm very surprised that Ismail Kone is there, and I didn't hear a specific reason why he wasn't. And Mark Anthony Kaye. So we had Ismail Kone as definite and Mark Anthony Kaye as likely. Both of those only made the preliminary squad. Left midfielder, of course, Alphonso Davies, not making the squad, but he had been carrying an injury. And right winger, our definite candidate, Tajon Buchanan, apparently in contract negotiations. And finally, two forwards who didn't make it, Jonathan David and Kyle Larin. All of these players named to the preliminary squad, but that doesn't mean much It just meant they wanted to keep them available in case they could come. It's not that they didn't make the cut, as it were. Okay, now we look at a few surprise inclusions. So not many here actually for Canada. Right back, Zachary Broguillard. We had him as possible but unlikely, but he did make the squad. Probably because of the absence of Alistair Johnson there. And then in the midfield, we have a left winger, Jacob Schaffelberg. We had him as possible, but unlikely, but he made it ahead of our possible candidate, Jaden Nelson, who only made the preliminary squad. So a couple of surprise inclusions. Well, the new players that I'm going to go over may be surprise inclusions too. So we have two new central defenders being tried out, and that is Moise Bombito and Zach McGraw. These guys might not actually even get onto the field, but they are on the roster. We have left midfielder Ahmed Ali with a bit of an asterisk beside him because of a concussion kind of injury warning. He might be over that by the time the cup begins, or into the cup anyway. And a new forward in Jacob Russell-Rowe. And we do have a lot of names, and I will only give the names of players who were on the preliminary squad and didn't make the final squad, but fans of Canada might be interested as some of these players may be upcoming. So I was aware of 3 of these guys in the soccer files. I had information on them, and then 5 or 6 of them were brand new names to me. So first one is forward Daniel Jebison, named to the preliminary squad, all of these guys. Luca Koleosho, a left winger, and right winger Ryan Raposo, all familiar to me. Well, not familiar to me, but names I had heard before. And then several names that came out of the blue, and I'll just name them: Achiel Cambridge, Deandra Kerr, Jaquiel Marshall-Rutti, Aidan Morris, Luca Petroso, Sean Ria, and Jonathan Sirios, all named to the preliminary squad, so we may see them in the future. And finally, an update on injuries. So Maxime Crepeau probably would have been the backup keeper, and he was named to the preliminary squad, but that fractured tibia preventing him from being in this cup. The other one is Samuel Piet, the sturdy midfielder, defensive midfielder, and he is out with a groin injury. And then we mentioned Ahmed Ali, listed as a concussion, but maybe over that during the cup. And that is it. So good luck, Canada team, and we will see you in our next